When it comes to staying as upright as possible when you're squatting, the first thing to understand is that it's not always upright. In fact, no matter how well built if you're squatting, if you were to look at this from the side, you're pretty much going to see some inclination of the torso. So what we're really looking at here is a consistent back angle. So that's probably better wording. It's the first place to understand. So then you can stop punishing yourself for not being as upright as physically possible, because some people just won't be able to sit in that close unless you get really janky with your foot positioning, your mobility, what your lower back position is in. So the first place is just think, okay, I need to make my back angle as consistently as possible. And what do I need to do that? First of all, I need to understand good squatting mechanics. We're looking at, again, high bar squatting, pretty much exclusive forward knee travel for most people. However, some people will need to focus on separating out the hips and the knees at the same time. So as their knees go forward, their hips go back, and this allows them for that back angle to stay nice and consistent. One of the main things people mess up when they're doing high bar squats and they don't have a consistent back angle is they either have the hips going back as you come up out of the bottom of the squat too early and not the knees going forward, or very often at the top of the squat, what often happens is instead of the hips and the knees going at the same time, if you go down, or if you think about hips as well, you go knees forward and hips back. What often happens is the hips go back first without any change in the knee angle, and then the knees move forward. So we've already immediately changed that back angle, which then of course makes it so much harder to keep that consistent back angle, because you're adding forward momentum to the barbell, you're sending your hips back, and then you're reducing your prime movers, the quads, in the high bar squat. So it's very, very important you understand squatting mechanics. The other place here is, of course, torso strength, quad strength, and mobility. So again, assuming you have sufficient mobility, we need to look at ankles, hips. A lot of times shoulder, pec, and thoracic are forgotten about when trying to stay as upright as possible in the high bar squat. And I think this is probably where some of that issue with the chest up is a bad cue came from. We've seen this a little bit frequently, which I think is completely egregious. It's just flat out wrong for the high bar squat. It's very useful in a lot of scenarios. The issue here is that some of the people saying this are very bound up, tight lifters, poor mobility. A lot of times they're power lifters or strongmen. And for them, they're unable to get chest up, and they're certainly not able to keep their chest up in the bottom of the squat. So instead of having sufficient mobility to stay upright in the squat, they just get kind of brute strength. They try and get this brace as much as possible. And then they think, okay, I'm bracing is really hard, so they can kind of brute force it through that. But most people don't have that option. So when it comes to staying upright, we do want some extension in the spine. We want that chest up because we want to keep this locked in extension. We're not overly worried about brace. A lot of times people have this concern that when I extend my chest or extend my lower back, I'm going to lose all of my brace. But that extension, the position, and keeping the barbell over your midfoot is much more important than the maximum brace, because we need to stay upright. Because no matter how well braced you are, if you're leaning too far forward in the bottom as your back angle changes, you're not going to be in a good position to squat heavier weights. So we need to make sure that we have a consistent brace, but we have a good extension in our chest or our lower back, depending on what positions you're in, depending on how wide you stand, depending on your torso length and your lower body length. But in general, a big chest up is important. If you're hypermobile, which a tiny percentage of the population might be, yeah, it's a bad cue. But saying that's a bad cue because a few outliers are messing things up doesn't make it a spectrum. For most people, high bar squatting, chest up is a good cue. So lastly, then you need to look at strength. Is your core strong enough? Are your abs strong enough? Is your lower back strong enough? Is your upper back strong enough? Are you able to maintain those positions? Are your quads strong enough to maintain positions and stop your torso taking over? If you can't answer all those questions, that's why.